The 80s were actually a pretty solid decade for crime films. Brian De Palma made classics like Scarface and The Untouchables. Michael Mann and Abel Ferrara were making interesting stuff too, although both of them would go on to make even better crime films later. But the thing is, the 80s was really the decade when the action movie took over. Audiences mostly wanted stuff more like Lethal Weapon, less like classic old-school crime stories, so a lot of really strong, quality films got buried. Even critically praised ones like At Close Range are still underrated. The ones on this list are even more overlooked. Here are 10 hidden crime gems from the 80s that still hold up in 2025. Alex Cutter's this Vietnam vet who came home seriously damaged, lost an eye, arm, and leg, and those are just the visible scars. Drinks heavily to deal with everything else, basically drowning in bitterness and sarcasm. His best friend is Richard Bone, a part-time gigolo who also sells expensive boats for a rich guy named George Swanson. One rainy night in Santa Barbara, Bone sees a guy dumping a body, and he and Cutter get it into their heads to expose the murderer, kicking off the rest of the story. It's this dark, complex crime thriller full of neo-noir atmosphere, excellent cinematography, and fantastic music. But here's the catch. The studio had no clue how to market it, so they pretty much dumped it. Tough sell, sure, but it's genuinely great filmmaking. John Hurd, always underrated, is phenomenal as Cutter. These aren't sentimental, typical Hollywood heroes. These are dark, complicated characters, and the script handles everything masterfully. One of the absolute best, most underrated crime films from that era, hands down. The Black Dahlia murder, the unsolved killing of Elizabeth Short, is still one of LA's most notorious crimes, inspiring tons of books, movies, and even songs. John Gregory Dunn's novel based on that murder was turned into this film by Ulu Grosbard, the guy who did the excellent crime drama Straight Time. This one stars Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall as brothers. Duvall's the cop investigating the murder. De Niro plays his brother, a Catholic priest. Some say they should have switched roles, but either way, watching these two legends together is great. And just to be clear, it's not a murder mystery, not really about solving the crime. Instead, it's a slow, character-driven drama about corruption, family tension, and morality. The writing's smart. The characters feel real, complex, flawed, and interesting. So if you're into thoughtful, atmospheric crime dramas instead of just flashy suspense stuff, definitely give this one a look. This one's a French crime film starring Yves Montand, Catherine Deneuve, and Gérard Depardieu, basically a dream cast. Yet somehow a lot of people missed it. Depardieu plays an escaped convict who crosses paths with a retired gangster and his wife, and from there, things get complicated fast. Actually, it's best not to say too much about the plot, just know that it's really well crafted and full of surprises. The characters make the movie. They're complicated, real, never feel fake or just there to move the plot forward. The story constantly zigzags around. You're never quite sure where it's headed, but that unpredictability makes it so good. It's not the usual good guys versus bad guys thing. Nobody here is entirely likable. Nobody's clearly villainous either, and that's exactly why it works. Maybe a little tough for casual viewers, but seriously rewarding if you stick with it. Another unsolved murder, but this time set among British aristocrats living in Kenya back in 1941. The victim was Jocelyn Hay, a wealthy British lord who was also, weirdly, part of the British Union of Fascists. His murder kept people obsessed for decades. The movie's based on an investigation book about the murder, and it's actually pretty fascinating. Not really about solving the crime, though. Instead, it digs into the complicated lives, relationships, and mindsets of these aristocrats, and it does it with sharp psychological depth and witty dialogue. Plus, visually, it's fantastic. The cast is also great. Greta Scacchi, John Hurt, even Hugh Grant pops up briefly. It really captures the whole lifestyle of wealthy Brits living in colonial territories right before independence kicked in. It did fine in the UK, but honestly, should have gotten way more international attention. When you talk great actor-director pairings, Sean Connery and Sidney Lumet always come up. Sure, they made Murder on the Orient Express, but even better were movies like The Hill and The Offense. Connery's performances there are honestly career best. So their final film together, Family Business, also starring Dustin Hoffman and Matthew Broderick, should have been big, right? but it actually flopped pretty hard at the box office. People were disappointed by the casting, or maybe the script didn't meet their expectations. Sure, Connery and Hoffman don't look related. Connery was literally just 7 years older, but who cares? Watching these three actors play off each other is genuinely fun. It's got a warm, charming tone and some really great interactions. Honestly, it feels unfair how harshly critics reacted. The problem is that expectations were super high. Everyone saw these huge names attached, expected a masterpiece, and when it turned out to be a smaller, warmer kind of film, they slammed it. But trust me, it's really enjoyable. A good caper story, a strong drama about fathers and sons, and genuinely entertaining thanks to Connery, Hoffman, and Broderick. Nicolas Roeg gets praised all the time by filmmakers and cinephiles. Usually it's about stuff like Don't Look Now, The Man Who Fell to Earth, or Walkabout. Sometimes even The Witches gets mentioned. But Roeg made other movies too, and most of them barely ever get talked about. Eureka is definitely one of those overlooked ones, right up there with Bad Timing. This one's actually based on a real-life story about this super-rich British gold miner named Sir Harry Oakes. And the movie covers tons of ground. It's about money, isolation, greed, betrayal, even gets into some supernatural territory. Gene Hackman is amazing here, but honestly, so is the entire cast. Rutger Hauer, Mickey Rourke, Joe Pesci, Teresa Russell, all delivering top-notch performances. Roeg's trademark style is totally on display here. Experimental editing, wild visuals, it's all there. Ari Aster once said Roeg could be brutal with images, and there's this murder scene here that proves him right. Extremely graphic, but also historically accurate. Here's one for the noir fans out there, with a heavy jazz vibe. Tommy Lee Jones stars as a slick Texan businessman with mafia connections, trying to close a huge real estate deal in Newcastle, struggling port city in northern England, but his whole plan hinges on buying this little jazz place called the Key Club. Problem is, the club's owner flat out refuses to sell, messing up the whole deal. Then you've got Brendan, an Irish guy working at the club, played by Sean Bean, who ends up meeting Kate, Melanie Griffith's character, an American woman who's also got ties to Jones's shady businessman. The film starts slow, mostly about atmosphere and mood, but eventually the plot kicks in, and things heat up fast. Sting's even in it. Makes sense since it's Newcastle and jazz, right? And he's really good. Actually, the whole cast is solid, the cinematography's fantastic, and the rainy, dark atmosphere totally pulls you in. Everyone talks about Coppola's The Cotton Club when it comes to jazz and crime stories from the 80s, but honestly, Stormy Monday deserves more love. It's a hidden gem. At first glance, you might think this is just another slasher about teenagers going on a violent spree, but it's way deeper than that. Written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong before they did The X-Files, this one's directed by Penelope Spheris, who deserves huge credit because the film never glorifies these killers. We understand their anger, but we never actually root for them, and yet somehow it still gets under your skin. Spheris later said she regretted making it, felt there was already enough violence in the world, but honestly, she's being way too hard on herself. This movie's violence is shocking, disturbing, and realistic. It never feels cool, even with the rock soundtrack she worries about. Charlie Sheen, back when he was serious, and Maxwell Caulfield are both excellent as the leads. Interesting side note, Nicolas Cage actually turned down one of these lead roles and later regretted it. It's easy to see why. This film sticks with you, asks hard questions about teenage violence, and refuses easy answers. Criminally underrated and honestly pretty disturbing. Crime movies usually lean pretty dark and heavy, but this one's a nice change of pace. It's not exactly hilarious, but it'll definitely make you smile. Basically, Don Ameche plays this humble old shoeshiner who gets offered money by the mafia to take the fall for a gangster's crime because he happens to look exactly like the guy. Ameche's scared, so he agrees. Then he's paired up with Joe Mantegna, this low-level gangster who's supposed to babysit him until he confesses in court. But the thing that makes this one so great is how real these characters feel, no over-the-top Hollywood comedy stuff. Just two very believable, very likable guys. Ameche and Mantegna's chemistry is fantastic, so good they actually shared Best Actor at the Venice Film Festival. David Mamet wrote and directed this one. Nowadays, he's not putting out much great stuff, but back then he was known for his sharp dialogue and realistic, memorable characters. "Everybody likes you when you're someone else." Classic Mammoth line. It's genuinely heartwarming without getting cheesy. Giuseppe Tornatore got famous directing Cinema Paradiso, right? But actually, his first ever movie was a mafia flick called The Professor. Ben Gazzara, one of John Cassavetes' favorite actors, who was amazing in Peter Bogdanovich's St. Jack, plays a mob boss loosely based on real-life Camorra kingpin Raffaele Cutolo. It's kind of your classic mafia story at first, the whole rags to riches thing, but Tornatore keeps it very real, very gritty, and avoids glamorizing the mafia lifestyle. Gazzara is fantastic, especially later on when his character starts losing his grip. And even though it's long, it was originally supposed to be a 5-hour TV miniseries, it never drags. The pacing's just perfect. If you like mob films, put this one on your list.